1959, John Freeman's guest on Face to Face was the outstanding mathematician and philosopher Bertrand Russell, then within 2 months of his 87th birthday. But far from being a frail old gentleman, he appeared before the camera as spry, mischievous and articulate as the public had ever known him throughout a long career as a campaigner in various causes at odds with the establishment. But it was from the establishment he came, grandson of 2 lords, one of them Lord John Russell, the Liberal Prime Minister. He went to Cambridge in 1890, where he wrote the Principles of Mathematics, and later his great work, Principia Mathematica. His academic work as one of the greatest philosophers of his day continued at Cambridge until the First World War, when his vigorous campaigning as a pacifist got him expelled from Trinity. But he continued as a writer, his History of Western Philosophy, published in 1945, gaining him a more popular acceptance and lasting financial security. Russell, a late Victorian, was an early crusader for free love, in revolt against the humbug and hypocrisy of much of Edwardian life, a freedom exemplified unashamedly in his own private life. After teaching in America, he returned to Britain in triumph after World War II, was given the Order of Merit in 1949, and won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1950. From the 50s onwards, his main concern was the threat of nuclear annihilation. He was the first president of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament at the time of the face-to-face interview. And 2 years later, still battling against authority, he was arrested at an anti-nuclear sit-in in Parliament Square and sentenced to 7 days in jail. He was 89 years old. His face-to-face interview reveals the qualities that sustained his reputation for decades: lucidity of mind, transparent honesty, and an endearing sense of fun.
By the death of the 3rd Earl of Russell, or Bertrand Russell as he preferred to call himself, at the age of 90, a link with a very distant past is severed. His grandfather, Lord John Russell, the Victorian Prime Minister, visited Napoleon in Elba. His maternal grandmother was a friend of the young pretender's widow. In his youth, he did work of importance in mathematical logic, but his eccentric attitude during the First World War. In the Second World War, he took no public part, having escaped to a neutral country just before its outbreak. In private conversation, he was wont to say that homicidal lunatics were well employed in killing each other, but that sensible men would keep out of their way while they were doing it. He appeared in extreme old age, full of enjoyment, no doubt owing in large measure to his invariable health. For politically, during his last years, he was as isolated as Milton after the Restoration. He was the last survivor of a dead epoch. That I wrote in 1937, a year before the Second World War began, as a prophecy of what I thought the Times would say about me when I died. I observed that the date I attributed to my death is 1962, which is coming ominously near and begins to cause me some alarm.
Well, before you feel too much alarm, let us examine this obituary which was written in jest and see how true it really is. To start with, let's go back to the distant past. What is your very earliest memory, Lord Russell?
Well, I suppose my very earliest memory is tumbling out of a pony carriage when I was 2 years old. And my earliest at all vivid memories are of arriving at the house of my grandparents, Pembroke Lodge in Richmond Park, after the death of my father, who died when I was 3.
How did you come to be in the care of your grandparents? Your mother had also died?
Yes, she died when I was 2 and my father when I was 3. So
do you have any memory of your parents?
Very little. I remember nothing of my mother. I remember my father once giving me a leaflet printed in red letters, and the red letters pleased me.
What was life like at Pembroke Lodge? Did your grandparents, for instance, entertain the great people of the day?
Yes, not very much. My grandfather was already an invalid. He could only get about in a bath chair. He died when I was 6. My grandmother survived for a long time till after I was married, but she lived in semi-retirement. We saw a lot of distinguished people, especially literary people.
Your grandfather had been a politician in his day, as your father.
My grandfather, yes, my grandfather was twice Prime Minister. My father was in Parliament for a very brief period.
Did you meet the great and famous who used to come to visit, or were you shut away in the nursery?
Oh, I used to meet them, yes.
Who especially impressed you at that age?
Well, I think Mr. Gladstone especially impressed me.
What's your memory of him?
Oh, I have a great many memories of Mr. Gladstone. He had an eye that could quell anybody. People who didn't know him can't quite understand his political importance. They depended on his hawk's eye. My most painful recollection of him is when I was 17 and very, very shy. And he came to stay with my people, and I was the only male in the family. And after the ladies had retired after dinner, I was left tete-a-tete with Mr. Gladstone. And he didn't do anything to alleviate my shyness. He made only one remark. He said, "This is very good port they've given me, but why have they given it me in a claret glass?" And I didn't know the answer.
Turning to your occupations as a child, what were the first books that impressed you? For instance, were you interested in history, in fairy stories, in adventure, or what?
Oh, I was always very much interested in history, very much. Fairy stories when I was younger, yes. And I regret to say that I liked Hans Andersen much better than Grimm. I don't now, but I did then, very much better. I read Hans Andersen's fairy tales over and over again when I was young.
Were you always a skeptic from small childhood, or did you believe in the conventions?
Oh, I wasn't a skeptic when I was very young, no. I was very deeply religious and lost my conventional beliefs slowly and painfully. Very slowly. I remember that now. This is another very early memory that I have, that when I was 4 years old, they'd just been telling me the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And I dreamt that I'd been eaten by a wolf, and to my great surprise, I was in the wolf's stomach and not in heaven.
This was the beginning, perhaps, of skepticism.
Yes.
Tell me, did you say your prayers when you were a child?
Oh, yes.
When did you cease doing that?
Oh, I suppose when I was about 12 or 13.
Were you made to say them before that?
Well, yes, I was made to at first, but I went on after I'd stopped being made to.
Yes. Will you tell me what experience it was that gave you your first intuition about skepticism when you were a child?
Well, I suppose you might say the time when I tried to catch an angel. They told me when I was an infant that angels watched round my bed while I slept. And I'd seen pictures of angels, and I thought I should very much like to see one. But I supposed that the moment I opened my eyes, they fled away. So I thought, well, next time I wake up, I won't open my eyes, and they won't know. And I did so, and I made a grab thinking I should catch an angel, but I didn't.
Do you think now, looking back, that there's any really unfortunate legacy that you carried out of your childhood?
I do. I mean...
Why are you not a Christian?
Because I see no evidence whatever for any of the Christian dogmas. I've examined all the stock arguments in favor of the existence of God, and none of them seem to me to be logically valid.
Do you think there's a practical reason for having a religious belief for many people?
Well, there can't be a practical reason for believing what isn't true. That's quite, at least I rule it out as impossible. Either the thing is true or it isn't. If it is true, you should believe it, and if it isn't, you shouldn't. And if you can't find out whether it's true or whether it isn't, you should suspend judgment. But you can't it seems to me a fundamental dishonesty and a fundamental treachery to intellectual integrity to hold a belief because you think it's useful and not because you think it's true.
Well, I was thinking of those people who find that some kind of religious code helps them to live their lives and gives them a very strict set of rules, the rights and the wrongs.
Yes, but you know, those rules are generally quite mistaken. A great many of them do more harm than good, and they would probably be able to find a rational morality that they can live by if they dropped this irrational, traditional, taboo morality that comes down from savage ages.
But are we, perhaps the ordinary person, perhaps isn't strong enough to find this own personal ethic? They have to have something imposed upon them from outside.
Oh, I don't think that's true. What is imposed on you from outside is of no value whatever. It doesn't count.
Well, you were brought up, of course, as a Christian. When did you first decide that you did not want to remain a believer in the Christian ethic?
I never decided that I didn't want to remain a believer. I decided between the ages of 15 and 18. I spent almost all my spare time thinking about Christian dogmas and trying to find out whether there was any reason to believe them. And by the time I was 18, I discarded the last of them.
Do you think that that gave you an extra strength in your life?
Oh, no, I shouldn't have said so. Neither extra strength nor the opposite. I mean, I was just engaged in the pursuit of knowledge.
As you approach the end of life, do you have any fear of some kind of afterlife, or do you feel that that is just
No, I think that's nonsense.
There is no afterlife.
None.
Do you have any fear of something that is common amongst atheists and agnostics, who have been atheists or agnostics in their lives, who are converted just before they die to a form of religion?
Well, you know, it doesn't happen nearly as often as religious people think it does. Because religious people, most of them, think that it's a virtuous act to tell lies about the deathbeds of agnostics and such. As a matter of fact, it doesn't happen very often.
One last question. Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned from it?
I should like to say two things. One intellectual and one moral. The intellectual thing I should want to say to them is this. When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you would wish to believe or by what you think would have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts. That is the intellectual thing that I should wish to say. The moral thing I should wish to say to them is very simple. I should say, love is wise, hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, we have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things that we don't like. We can only live together in that way. And if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity and a kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet.